In the former lessons, we have placed text objects in our projects, and in exactly the same manner we can use other graphical objects. I've still opened our sample project, and now I go to the object section, and we know already the head object. That's the object that moves along our route. In this project we use an airplane, and apart from the head object we have objects at stopover points, and we have free placeable objects. And you will learn very fast how free placeable objects work, because the system works exactly as with the text objects. For adding a new object, we can choose between 3D objects and image objects, and both types as dynamic or static objects. So this works exactly the same as with the text objects. Dynamic objects are placed at a specific point on our virtual planet at specific coordinates, whereas static objects are placed on our screen and they don't change their position. So for now I select 3D object dynamic. To actually add a new object, I press this button, add new object, and this takes me to the object selection window. We have seen it already when we selected the head object, and I'm now in the main category Vasco da Gama. Beside the Vasco da Gama category I have the favorite. This category contains all the objects that I have placed in the favorites list using this button here. And the last used group, this group contains of course the last used objects. If you have acquired additional object packages from Motion Studios, then they will appear in this menu. So by now I will select the subcategory sites, where we find different well-known buildings all around the world. And here I will select the Eiffel Tower. Now all of the objects in this sites group come with GPS coordinates. And here with this function, use of georeferenced data, I have the possibility to tell Vasco da Gama to use this data. That means when this option is checked, then Vasco da Gama will place the Eiffel Tower at its correct geographic position on our world map. If I uncheck this parameter, then Vasco da Gama will place the Eiffel Tower at the position at the center of the work screen. I will leave it checked at this time, and now I press OK, and Vasco da Gama has placed our Eiffel Tower at the correct position in Paris. From the top-down view it looks a little bit strange, but when we switch to editor view, then you can see this is really a building and it is the Eiffel Tower. I switch back to editor view, and now let's have a look at the parameters on the right. Here we have the object list menu, and for every object we have a name field, and in this name field normally we see the object name, but we can change it. We can write Eiffel Tower and instantly the object name in the list changes, and the possibility to be able to change the name is very useful. Although you would ask yourself right now, what's the problem of the name Eiffel Tower? Because in your projects normally you will place only one Eiffel Tower. But sometimes you will place other objects and maybe several times the same object. And so here you have the possibility, for example, to add a number or some other naming scheme. And then all the objects appear here in the object list where you can select them. So you select the object here. The active object will be marked with red color, and its parameters we can see down here. Below the button for adding a new object, we find buttons for changing the object, for deleting, and the size wheel. And by the way, sizes of objects in Vasco da Gama are really relative, because at this point, of course, the Eiffel Tower is way too big, but for representation of a city on the map, this size is really good, although in reality it is far too big. For example, when you would like to place the Eiffel Tower on a street map of Paris, then the building should be at its real size. But when we have a project where we would like to represent the city of Paris and New York, and we place the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty, then we make both buildings very big so that they can easily be recognized. So now I switch back to Editor View, and directly above the size wheel we find the option Size Static. And when I turn this option on and now I zoom in the work window, then the Eiffel Tower, the building, maintains the same size, as you can see it now. And therefore this option is by default turned off, because you need this function only in very rare special situations. Normally it is turned off, and when I zoom in, the building gets bigger, and when I zoom out, it gets smaller. So basically we have seen now all special things around objects, because all the other parameters are exactly the same as with the text objects. Let's have a look at the parameters here at the bottom. Longitude, latitude, altitude. Of course, with a building like the Eiffel Tower, the altitude parameter does not make sense, although technically we could lift it up in the air. But with other objects, like symbols for example, it could make sense to have them floating in the air. In the view group, we have the face to camera option. Normally for a building it doesn't make sense to turn it on, but again, if you use symbols, then it could make sense to activate the face to camera over 2 or 3 axes, so that we can see always the front of the symbol. The fade in and fade out effects work exactly the same, and of course here we have to set a link to a stop over point to define a time position for the effects. And of course the effects in the last group of parameters work in the same manner. So now let's have a look at this button here on the right, Change Object. You will now ask yourself, if I can alter all the parameters here, for what do we need a button for changing the object? Well, it is very simple. When you would like to change the object, so if you would like to use a symbol instead of the Eiffel Tower, then without this button, the only way you can realize it is delete the object and add a new object. But this deletes as well all the parameters. But with the button Change Object, I can change the object without altering all the other parameters. For example, Change Object, I go to the symbol group and select the first one here, symbol 1, select with OK, and now I have changed the Eiffel Tower against this symbol. And now I select face to camera, 3 axes. Imagine you have several symbols used in your project, and then you would like to change the type of the symbol. And the Change Object button allows you to change only the object and leaving all other parameters defined as they are. And in this situation, this button is worth a pot of gold. We have seen that all the buildings in the sites group of objects come with their GPS coordinates, so that Vasco da Gama can place them on their correct position on the planet. But other objects, like the ones in the symbol group, don't have any GPS coordinates. But when you need one of those objects at a specific location, then there are 2 ways to do this. I go back to Editor View, and the first way to place a symbol on a specific location on the planet is to use the longitude and latitude parameter. Here you can set the position to the exact coordinates that you would like. The second way is a 2-step process, and it is very handy when you would like to place a symbol on a position which is contained in the GPS database. And now I will show you how you can do it. First, I delete this object. I press the delete button, accept with yes, and now our object has disappeared. So now I would like to place a symbol at the exact position of Paris. And since the symbols don't have any GPS coordinates, I have to use a trick. We have learned that when Vasco da Gama doesn't know where to place an object, it places it in the center of the work screen. And now it's time to use this handy function of the navigation and view toolbar, set a position from the GPS database. So what we do is the following. We use this function to set the view to a specific location, and this will move the position from the GPS database to the center of the work window, and this is actually the position where a new object will be created. So I will move here a little bit our planet, and now let's say we want to add a new object at the position of Paris. Now I click this button, search for Paris in the GPS database. Here is Paris in France. I accept with OK, and now this function has moved the position of Paris to the center of the work window. And now, without moving the planet, without moving the map, I add a new object. We are still at the symbol group. I take the first symbol. Here we don't have any coordinates, so the symbol will be created in the center of the work screen at the position of Paris. So, as I told you, this is a two-step process, and this is the handy function. And again, I would like to make a hint to the aid to navigation. I will set the position of north upward, and to these tool buttons here to hide the objects. This is the second one for the head objects, and the third one is for free placeable objects. So sometimes those symbols are really big, and when you have lots of them and you would like to work in the editor window, it can be useful to hide them temporarily. Here you can hide them and make them visible again. You sure will have noticed that I didn't mention the animation parameter, and now it's the time to do it. First, I would like to change the object again. I click Change Object, and now I move from the Symbols category to Persons and Animals. And here we have several interesting objects, and you can see directly in the first object here, the cyclist. This object has an animation. The cyclist is moving its legs and the wheels are moving. Whereas the second object, the scooter, isn't animated. It has only a particle effect. And we know the particle effect we can turn on or off here with this setting, but with the animation this doesn't work. Let's go back to the cyclist. You see, this is completely off because this object doesn't have any particle effect, so we can't turn it on or off here. And the animation is controlled with this setting here. So I accept with OK, and now we have the cyclist placed instead of the symbol object. And now let's turn on the animation and we go to the preview window, and when we play back our animation right now, the cyclist is moving its leg and the wheels are turning, although it doesn't move. And this doesn't look correct, and therefore we have here the parameter of the animation. So this is a parameter that we can change at any stopover point. Let's have a look at another object. For example, in the same group we find here those couples which are walking. This is the same situation. Here we have an animation. Now I can change back to the symbol, to the former symbol, and now you know the difference between particle effects and animation and where to turn either one on or off. And of course, I would recommend you to have a look at the additional object packages that are available from Motion Studios, because they have a great effect, a great visual impact when you create animations, and they will make your projects much more exciting.